have online. So, move on here to, the minutes of September 10th. Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes?
Yeah.
Did you have, or somebody have a last minute change?
I had a last minute change
What-
on.
What did you change?
On the Securitas paragraph, where they wanted us to look at, she put it, she didn't get in the thing, she put it on the, agenda. It gave resolution that we elected to not pursue that avenue, it closed the door on that item.
Okay.
Cause it was left hanging that they had a presentation and,
Where is it, what paragraph is this, Nancy?
it was the presentation that was done by the Securitas person.
Oh, okay.
So where would that be, do you think?
It was toward the
Funds.
end.
Is it under Association Manager Report? Is it in there? Okay.
Let's see here.
Oh, is this under my section?
I think it is, I thought I saw
Under
something.
paragraph 7, 1, 2, 3, the fourth paragraph, is that where it is?
Yeah, Dan Musey, isn't that who we're
Yeah,
talking?
yeah, he's the Securitas
I
manager.
don't have a fourth.
It's under section
Hmm.
7.
Number 7, go to 7.
Oh, the on-site guard
The
management
one she just
program?
handed
Yes,
That's the one.
yeah, that's the fourth, bullet.
And the sentence that she added was the committee decided to not move forward with the tracking devices for the guards.
Mhm.
Okay.
So it closed that loop.
Okay,
All right.
okay.
Any other changes to the minutes?
Yeah, I have one. I'm not looking at the current, because I can't, I just arrived someplace, I can't get my computer going, but I believe paragraphs 5 and 6 both refer to an attachment, and I think it's the same attachment. It's Herb's background investment on surplus funds.
Yeah, it's a
Seems
two-page
to me that
attachment.
if it
Okay.
refers to the same
Yeah.
attachment, we ought to just eliminate number 5 and renumber all the rest of the paragraphs.
It was done.
It was done.
It's all
Uh,
done. I took care
Am
of
I
Diane?
correct about that? I don't know.
Yes,
Diane?
I
It's
think
been
so.
corrected.
It's been corrected.
Okay. The other one is, I have is a very minor one, which I think is still there. I tried to get it corrected before. In the Tom's work group report, the fifth, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullets down, Armor Max, I believe is spelled. There's an O in there. It
Oh.
should be in there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, anybody else have changes?
Just a number 9, John Greca,
With an A.
with an A.
Wait a minute, where are we?
Yeah, an A after my name, thanks.
Oh, that's in number 9?
At the- at-
Number 9.
In the,
Yeah,
Capitalized
in the
that word
bold, in the
group
bolded,
Here,
in the,
right
in
here.
your new version.
Oh,
Number 9.
oh, there we go,
Yes.
okay. Okay.
Okay.
okay,
Alright.
with those changes, do I hear a motion?
Move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
This away.
We have with us Stephen Bloom, from Severn Trent. Chris, did you wanna give your financial report, which is next on the list first, and then we move on to his area, or?
It doesn't matter, but I can go ahead, in case anybody has any questions about our
Okay.
September. I tried to, number the pages as I think Herb or, Phil suggested, or maybe both, and I did try to do that with your profit and loss budget versus actual. The first, it looks like this,
Page 1 of
Profit
3.
and loss.
page 1 of 3. It's a packet, it's stapled and has 5 pages in the packet.
Did you get past that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And basically, this is October through September is the first column, what our budget is. I also tried to adjust, that was suggested, is this breakout waterway management. So if you look on the bottom of page 2 of 3, you see our HOA combined totals and our combined budget, and then the next page shows the waterway, and then another total, which includes everything on the prior page. But that way, the waterways is broken out instead of just added in to the grand total. I think that was suggested last month. And then the fourth page is our profit and loss for only the month of September. September, Sarah did a good job in trying to, get everybody's invoices that were for September so that we can include and not have them carried forward. However, Ameriscape had not billed us for September for their monthly fees, and neither did Securitas for the month of September. So that means for the month of September, we still have about 42 and change thousand. So I rounded it to 43, that we would still have September expenses that wouldn't be paid until October. And I know last year we seemed to have a bunch more in that. And then the final sheet is the balance sheet, which basically ties back in. It's as of July 31st, and the reason it's July 31st is because I tie our balance sheet numbers, which is where our income comes from, through the Gateway reports prepared by Severn Trent, and that's the latest financials that I had from Severn Trent was July.
Seems to me for future reference, we ought to be able to get more up-to-date stuff.
Well, actually, compared to Meredith, which was before, we were several months behind. I mean.
Oh, I recognize it's an improvement.
Yeah, oh, yeah, it's
We ought to
definitely an
We ought to be able to
improvement.
do even better.
Well, I think maybe Stephen could speak to this too, but I think the reason is that I think that their financials go to the board and have to be approved, and, and then we get them after that fact. We don't get them before
Right.
they're approved, and I think that's what the lag time is.
I think they promised to have it like 1 month,
Well, and
which
I
they
guess-
probably give it to the board.
Right, and we're
Yeah, and
then
reporting
we
in
wait-
September,
we
and
wait
they're
a month
July,
past
but
that.
when we were
Correct.
with Meredith, it would have
It was
been, we
correct.
would have been lucky to have Mays at this point in
Right.
time. So
Yeah,
it
right.
is much, much better
Oh, I
than it
agree.
was.
It's a great improvement.
Yeah.
Well, now, in the packages that go to the supervisors from Severn Trent, there should be at least, a report that might even be more up to date than this. Stephen, is that what, the report that goes to the supervisors, that has the balance sheets and the operating expenses and so forth, monthly? We're current through July. Did they have August yet?
No,
No?
You may
No.
have to speak into the,
Because Phil won't be able to hear you.
Oh.
Whoops.
this won't,
You really won't be able to hear you now. I broke it. Does that mean I have to buy it?
Yes.
I don't know. I can't, I don't have my glasses on. I gotta pull it back in.
So it looks like July, is what we're looking at
Is the
here as
latest.
being the latest.
And so then that brings me to like the P-PAC fund summary report, which is similar to what I did last month. So our cash balance at 7/31 is $2,095,000, the projected revenue, and where you see the next couple of lines down where we have expenses for 2 months of CDD expenses and 2 months of HOA. That's because even though we have submitted bills through September 30th, they're not reflective on the Gateway reports yet. So that's why I'm taking it back out of cash, because according to Gateway, we haven't paid those yet, even though they're in our expenses. There's a lag time, and that's why it's important. That's why I did this like fund summary report. And then I have the ponds number that was in there. Our net fund balance projected is 821. And then these are the things that we had approved at the June 18th meeting that have been paid for, but once again, because these numbers are only as of July and we hadn't paid them till after July 31st, we still need to subtract that from that 821 balance. So they're the MP rotators, the Indian Hawthorne Phase 1, and the uplighting. And then we had a couple of things that we had a motion and approved in September. That was for the realignment of Trieste, the electronic traffic sign for 6,000, traffic signs at 1,000 apiece. The uplighting at Tree Line and Pelican Reserve Boulevard, and then the remaining 2 phases of Indian Hawthorne, and then that totaled another 39,000, and that was also subtracted from that 821. And then, Scott sent us a innocently enough asked question about Cypress Grove, the turnover, and in working with Sarah, we uncovered that some things that we had thought we had budgeted for Cypress Grove, that it was it was not. So in addition to that, we have about $18,800 in not budgeted for Carina or Cypress Grove expenses, and those are broken down per landscape contract. It was that's only $96. But the annuals, evidently, when they had given Tracy a budget for annuals, they did not include the neighborhood monuments at 2 rotations apiece, so that's an initial $1,600, almost $1,700. Tree trimming, evidently, they had only quoted her for Cypress Grove 1 and not Cypress Grove 1 and 2, so there's another $4,700. Irrigation was not quoted at all, and they estimate that to be $2,300 for Cypress Grove. And then plant replacements, currently, per Sarah, we need about $6,500 in plant replacements right now. So she's budgeting $10,000, or would like to budget $10,000 for 2016. And the reason that is because Cypress Grove 1 has been there for quite a while.
I have to go back for a moment. Cypress Grove has been turned over, or has it not
No,
been?
it has not been.
So,
But these are things that, if you remember in our budget, we have budgeted for certain things,
Correct.
including landscaping.
Correct.
And these are in addition, these are things that we did not know that needed to be budgeted for.
but I'm still confused. Is this for 2015 or 2016?
2016.
2016?
Mhm.
All right.
The year that we're in, well, 2015, 2016, the year that just started on October.
I'm talking about fiscal year, not calendar
Yeah,
year.
yes, yes.
Well, we're too late to quote budget for anything.
Oh, no, correct,
Yeah.
but we do have excess funds that were
But we
put in for
haven't
the.
used the money that was there in the budget for this purpose.
Well,
Even
no,
though
this is in addition to that.
But we haven't used that money.
No, we haven't used it, but.
So the
I
money
just-
is available, I think.
It is, no, the money is available,
Okay,
but
all
the
right.
thing is that it's important to note that this number of 18,815 was not budgeted in the budget that we
Previously,
submitted
right.
previously.
Gotcha.
Now, I
Okay.
know that there's monies
Okay.
that have not, that we
Gotcha.
budgeted and
Okay.
have not been spent.
Two different subjects.
Exactly, but it's
Okay.
important to note, it's almost like when we uncovered the FPL light pole situation.
Gotcha.
And we knew that we were underfunded. We had enough time to put that in the budget, but because of what was, this was just actually uncovered within like the last 10 days.
Okay.
So, even since our last meeting. So that's why it was important to put there. And then also, if the turnover, whenever the turnover happens, we would also be responsible for the sidewalk and road repairs. And basically, that means pressure washing. And we haven't gotten a quote on that, but Sarah seems to think that that might be about $8,000 to $10,000.
Do we have any information as to when we think the turnover will occur?
Okay, again, this is Scott Connell for those on the call and things. David Caldwell sent an email to myself September 23rd and asked this question. He states, I know the ball is in WCI's court for the turnover of the landscaping on Cypress Grove right-of-way in Pelican Reserve. My question is, the Gateway Services Community Development District agreeable to accepting it being the landscaping and irrigation now, and then accept at a future and later date the road improvements being the pavement, the curb, sidewalk, drainage, and street lighting. If you can do a two-step process here, I would like to do so. So that's prompted me to think, Cypress Grove Phase 1 was initially walked prior to my coming on board, so that's been 2.5, 3 years ago. There was a punch list done. I believe the work got done, but it was never re-inspected. They never, they being WCI, never turned in the rest of the paperwork for ownership and transfer. And then Phase 2 was built all the way to the circle, and the same thing happened. They constructed it. They came to us a year and a half ago and said, we'd like you to take Phase 2. And the question came back, well, what happened to Phase 1? And the reply was, we're not going to take phase two without taking phase one first. Or then it came back, we'll do them jointly. Well, they've never come back to us until now, was, 2-3 weeks ago. And David said, well, would you take over the landscaping and the irrigation on phases 1 and 2?
And that would be effective from the 1st of October past?
No, whenever a date certain, it's a partial phase.
My-
How
feel-
how
my
did you
feeling-
respond?
I have not responded
Okay,
because I thought, well, I believe there's money in the budget, but let me check.
Right,
So
and
I've been
that's what
working with-
started the conversation
with Chris and all,
between
yeah.
Sarah and myself.
Yeah.
needs to be our decision first and then a recommendation to the supervisor.
Right, well, and Scott just kind of like asked me what was budgeted, and I said landscaping, to my knowledge, was budgeted,
Right.
because we knew, we budgeted that
was
actually
covered.
the fiscal year that just ended. But that prompted me to contact Sarah and say, irrigation was never discussed, so what is the recommendation and that was the $2,300 that you see on my paper. But then as we delved into it a little bit further, we discovered that the monuments weren't budgeted, landscaping, there was like tree and sod, plant replacements weren't budgeted, and so that's how all of this 18,000 kind of bloomed into 18,000. Now, we already have budgeted for the FPL lights, and the FPL count, even though there's, I think, 82 lights that are expected to be turned over to us, we don't know when, but we budgeted for those in fiscal year 2016.
Right, because that runs with the land, is what
Okay, so
we
we
heard from Tony.
Okay.
So, since that runs with the land, we had to budget for that. This is a choice that we need to make about whether we wanna do it the way WCI has asked to do it, and then make our
What's the
recommendation.
advantage to us of doing it piecemeal? There is none. I think we ought to accept it all
Well-
or nothing.
Well, if I
Well-
may, my opinion, a positive of this would that you would then be in control of the landscaping and the irrigation on what needs to be done and done to your criteria. That's basically as I
Well,
see it.
the other part of this is, I think, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, but, you didn't budget for it in the, HOA budget either.
Correct, because it's
So-
owned by WCI, so, correct.
So there's no money that's been budgeted anywhere for this.
So who's responsible for the repair and maintenance of the, say, irrigation now?
WCI.
So why not leave it that way as long as possible?
I'm just,
You're the messenger.
I was asked to raise the question.
Sure.
And
Don't
I
shoot the
figured we better do it
messenger.
in-house
Just-
before it goes further.
Another question, from your perspective, is there anything that they haven't done that would support not transitioning that irrigation or landscaping responsibility? Because you said things have been inspected already.
No,
Well-
nothing new.
Phase 2
I
is
thought he
not.
said both of them were.
Phase 1
but-
and Phase 2 have been inspected.
Yes.
Punch lists were developed
By who?
by the CDD. Phase 1 also had some residents.
What, phase one had members of this committee, and I don't remember who all it was, but it was members of this committee that went out with the engineer,
Mhm.
and I don't know who else, because that was about the time I transitioned off and walked it and helped come up with the punch list. So I don't think anybody here walked phase two.
Phase 2 had the landscape architect, representatives from the CDD. I don't think there's anybody from PPAC at that meeting. I can't remember right now.
What landscape, WCI's landscape architect?
No, he said CDD.
And he prepared the punch list, WCI's landscape architect.
Oh, I thought you said it was CDD's.
W-
And the CDD representatives were there.
Okay.
And a
Who
list
were
was
the
made.
CDD representatives? Do we know?
Myself and L. Harris, and I think it was just the two of us, along with, I think Tetra Tech was with us. I don't remember who.
Okay.
Probably
Okay, so-
Tyler Wainwright.
So the so-called punch lists that were developed in both cases, has that punch list been satisfied to your knowledge?
At one time, I believe it was, but it was never accepted. They never called us back to come and re-inspect
Can you back
On
up a
phase
little bit?
two.
Exactly what was inspected?
the plantings
Just the plantings.
Yes, at that
Not the
time.
roadway, not the sidewalks, not
Yeah,
the
we're not talking
irrigation
about
system.
roadways yet,
Just the
right?
plantings.
Just the plant, not the irrigation system.
They did run the zones, yeah, they ran all the zones.
They counted heads and all that kind of thing.
I believe so, yeah, yep.
Okay, so that's
So it
what we're
needs to be
talking about. We're not
re-inspected.
talking about the road itself.
No.
We're not talking
No
about the
road,
road
no
itself.
sidewalks.
Just talking about the landscaping and grass and
That's
the
correct.
irrigation,
Right.
whatever.
They would like to do
Okay.
landscaping and irrigation first.
Fine.
It
So-
would, it would need to be redone.
Well, my question to you is, would you be willing to go out and, whatever that punch list said, go back out there and say, has that stuff been done?
We can
Yeah.
form a group and go back out and do that,
You know, I
yeah,
mean,
sure.
and we wouldn't accept anything until that punch list was completed.
Sure, but I
Oh,
would
yeah,
like,
yeah.
You're right, certainly, but was there any prior agreement that we would break it up this way? In
None.
other words, landscaping, irrigation, and then separately roads and sidewalks?
Right.
no,
No, so we don't have to do it that
No.
way. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that, I would have expected it would have come to us
As one.
first as a question, are
Yeah.
you
Well-
interested? Yeah.
that's why I'm here today.
Right.
One of the reasons.
But I think
May I
to,
just throw in a question here, because I'm not hearing absolutely everything that's going on. Chris, what is the sum total of the unbudgeted items? You were kind of reeling them off, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
I didn't get it all.
it's $18,815, but that's not counting pressure washing of the sidewalks, which Sarah estimates between 8 and 10. She hasn't gotten a firm,
Okay.
estimate yet.
But so approximately, we're talking about $30,000.
That's correct.
Well,
And that would cover the irrigation and the landscaping for both phases 1 and 2?
Yes, and in addition to that, it also includes, yes, additional landscaping that we didn't know wasn't in our, original budget. So yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
but if we, as they're asking for, is just landscaping irrigation, no sidewalk at this time.
Right, so that would,
Yeah.
That would
right, so then it would be,
decrease that amount.
then it would be like about 20. Well, it would be my 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
It would be my 18.8, so we
Okay,
can
so-
round that to 20.
My point is seeing if the funds were available so that you can make an educated recommendation
Right.
before we move on.
Would I be correct to say if we went out and re-inspected and we found landscaping that needed to be replaced, that would be something that we would ask WCI to do before we turned over?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So some of that 18,000 would go away. Some.
But I do think though that that I think we are right now at 6,500 of plant replacements in Cypress Grove. That needs to be replaced. But I don't think that we can't afford to not budget for it going
Oh,
forward.
I'm not talking about
Okay,
budgeting, I'm
okay.
just talking about whether or not we wanna consider this early turnover or not.
Yeah, again, what's the advantage to us to do the early turnover? I don't see any,
There isn't.
so why are we even considering it?
I mean, as I say, I don't have a
At
dog
this
in this
point.
fight, other
We
than.
understand you're the messenger.
You're
can
the messenger,
control-
yeah, right, I-
You can pick out the plantings, you can tell your landscape contractor to do what you want versus going through WCI and having them address it
Well, at this
in their
point, we
fashion.
can tell WCI we want all these plants replaced that aren't doing too well before turnover, as opposed to having us do that with plants of our choice.
Right.
Okay,
And our
so
money.
we save money that way.
Any adjustments and ongoing maintenance or whatever.
Plus, it's a stick you can
That's the-
hold
that's
over them, you know.
the advantage. Disadvantage is that you start after paying for the maintenance.
So what does WCI wanna do for us if we turn it over early? That's the way I look at it.
Mhm. And I haven't heard what it.
Yeah, what's in it for us?
What's in it for us?
What's in it for us, Scott?
Nothing.
Nothing.
I just,
Well, you got the message.
I mean, what,
Let's
is there?
let's vote on whether we do it.
Do you want me to ask them
Well,
what's in it
don't-
for them?
But I thought it was
Or
that
for you?
we wanted Scott to go back out and make sure the punch list.
Well,
That's,
Oh.
yes,
that's
not
if you wanted,
anyway.
that's all
If you wanna do the
consider
turnover.
early
Oh, okay.
turnover.
The
Yeah,
first
yeah, yeah.
decision is, do we wanna do the early turnover? And the
And then
one.
if so, what are the conditions?
Yeah,
So-
and the one benefit is if those roads are, if it's done and the landscapers are out there and so forth, then it would be consistent with what we're doing in the rest of the community, and it wouldn't make whoever's out there in Corina, Matarita, whoever's on that other end, feel that they were different in any way.
Again,
This time,
supervisors
I
can
don't
do what
think
they
there's
wanna
any
do,
major
right?
problem with the landscaping. I mean, I've taken that road before, it seems fine.
Well, I'm just saying, this, that's the only thing I can think of, is that it's all one community kind of concept. But, having said that, we can take a vote. I'll entertain a motion if somebody would like to make a motion regarding the early turnover.
Why are we
No,
not,
I make a motion that we accept both the landscaping and the roadway at the same time.
Well, he made a motion, if somebody wants to
Yeah.
second it, then I'll comment.
No second? Okay.
So let me make a
Motion
comment.
fails.
Is there any reason why the road isn't being turned over? Are there some large
Like that.
unresolved issues associated with turning the road over? That they can't do it all like we normally do it? I mean, I don't know, why do we wanna separate it? Why do they wanna
well, if
separate
we
it?
get the roads turned over, wouldn't we be responsible for the second coat that hasn't been put on, part of the new area, or no?
Well,
No,
they're not-
they are responsible for
Yeah.
the second layer of
Okay,
asphalt.
okay.
Period.
Sometimes the developer will go ahead and leave a bond in place to cover the second lift,
Okay.
which I believe they have already in place with the city.
Mhm.
There is one in place for the.
For the whole
over
thing,
the
probably.
bridge. No, for
Um,
over the bridge.
Okay.
From a constructability point of view and things is, they don't wanna do the final lift until they're through with all the heavy equipment moving
Sure.
out, all the homes are built.
Yeah.
Then you come
Sure.
out, and it benefits the residents, cause then you have a good 20-year life on that road. Meanwhile, they're running heavy equipment back and forth, they're still building in Carina, down in the southwest side. So they're crossing this phase 2 area, with construction traffic. They have built the tie-ins to the other neighborhoods, Carina and Matarita, onto, Cypress Grove, where the brick pavers go. They've redone that, they've, overlaid back in Carina, some of the streets in there. So they're working their way out. But you still have construction traffic crossing the southern end of phase 2. They still get in and out of there for, the area, the new fourplexes south of the flowway, which are, thank you, Casella. So they're gonna have construction on that circle for,
while.
quite a while.
I'd like to make a motion that we do not accept David Caldwell's recommendation at this time.
I'll second that.
This motion to do what? What you
Not
say?
accept the
His
proposal.
recommendation.
Which is what?
his
Which is
proposal.
what?
Well, he can read it. That way you're
To do it in two
responding
phases.
specifically to his
To the
request.
early acceptance of the landscaping and
Irrigation.
irrigation.
Well, are we calling it early acceptance because they're not completely out of there yet? I guess
Se-
that's
Or
why I'm
separate
confused.
exception,
Okay.
separate.
It's separate.
Well, how does he word his letter?
It can be done in a two-step process, is basically what he's asking. Step 1 would be the landscape irrigation, and later on would be the road improvements,
So
being
we
the
not
pavement,
gonna
curb,
accept David
sidewalks,
Caldwell's
drainage.
recommendation, as stated in email,
Request.
such and such of date, such and such.
Right.
At this time.
Do you wanna say at this time, or just?
I'd say at this time, there may be other reasons later on.
He may come back
Yeah,
and
may
say,
come
well,
back.
if you do
He
do
may ask the
this,
question
we'll
again.
give you
Sure,
something
yeah.
else.
Right.
And you might wanna reconsider at that point.
And we could always.
Absolutely.
September 23rd.
And then again, the supervisors don't have to do it this way either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
So
your
I-
recommendation.
Well, we haven't voted.
We haven't voted.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He put a motion, I second.
Okay, let's read the motion again, just for
Sure.
the record. The motion, as I understand it, is that the proposal from David Caldwell of WCI not be accepted as a two-step process for turnover of
Phase 1.
the
No.
phase 2.
That's not in his letter, phase 1, phase 2. Be careful.
He doesn't say
He
that.
just talked about irrigation and
Landscape.
landscaping.
Oh, he doesn't even
Yeah,
do
but-
that.
Versus roads.
But the Cypress Grove was built, there was a phase 1 and then a phase 2.
Right, but his letter doesn't refer to that, I don't think.
It does in the beginning, phase 1
In
and
the
phase 2,
beginning.
yes.
Phase 1 and phase 2.
But he wants to combine that together in terms of irrigation.
So he wants to
and
combine phase
landscaping.
1 and phase 2 together.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Yeah, so, yeah, don't accept it, that's all, just don't accept the proposal.
All right, Nancy, you wanna try again?
Just
All right.
accept his proposal. Yes.
As I understand the motion that we have in front of us, it's to not accept the request to separate the turnover of landscaping and irrigation from the turnover of the roads.
For phase
Road
one and
improvements.
phase two.
It's in both the Cypress phase one
And
and
phase
phase,
two.
say, phase two, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
I think that's
Yep.
what I'm hearing.
Right, okay, so we had a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
I
Okay.
think we're.
Right. And thank you for your efforts on double checking our numbers.
Well, but I do think that it's important though to know, I mean, what our costs are associated with going forward.
absolutely.
Even
Oh, I
though we
think-
hadn't budgeted, but I do think it's important because before it was just like, okay, we didn't even think about irrigation. And then plant replacements and then the pressure washing, that wasn't even a point of discussion.
No, I think you're absolutely right, because the supervisors may say, we want to accept it.
Exactly, exactly.
Scott, that needs
Yeah.
to, Stephen's gonna be up next.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't
But
you
they
leave that?
can't hear her now.
Oh,
Oh. Phil can't hear Chris.
What?
Okay.
sorry, did you hear what I said? I don't
No.
remember what I said.
We're okay.
I said I think it's important that we still went through kind of the fact-finding to find out what our costs would be when we do get it turned over, considering that we were about 30,000 shy of what we should have been budgeted for Cypress Grove.
Absolutely, I'm glad you did that, thank you, yes, I absolutely agree.
Okay.
Hey, Chris, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm trying to I don't know enough about these reports, but I'm trying to reconcile two numbers I see here.
Okay.
On the treasurer's report in the big package, there's looks like a cash balance in the Pelican Reserve Fund of 2,000,007 something.
Which page are you on?
Doesn't
It's
have
on
a
the
page
big
number.
package.
I'm
Oh.
on,
The
it's the
balance?
treasurer's report dated June 30th.
You shouldn't have anything June 30th. It should
Well,
be
it's in this
July.
package.
It's in this big
Oh,
package.
the big package.
The big
Oh,
package.
okay.
And then we're down to, it looks like a cash balance of 2,000,001 or so.
Well, that's because the one, I think the report that you're looking at for the treasurers is including what we already have in, our, what is it called? Reserves of the 597.
Okay, the 2.7 includes the reserve?
Mhm.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yes, yes,
okay,
that's the big
okay,
difference.
okay.
So basically, before, is Phil here? Okay. Phil, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can,
Okay.
thank you.
So basically, the report that I did with the, for July 31st, we came up with the remaining fund balance after, and that's including the 18,000 that we just spoke about. Our fund balance remaining would be 737,876. And then I took out the 3 months cushion, which is still kind of a sticking point. I still like to keep that in there until we kind of vote otherwise. And that would bring us down to 282. But basically, we have 737, and I think I had a hard time following your report, but I think, but I know that you sent that to Stephen, so I think that's where we are at this point, is to go through your rough cash flow projection and get Stephen's comments on, how to better invest our excess funds.
Yeah, Chris, I was working off the cash balance that you gave for
at June 30th.
Yes,
Yeah, and I didn't I didn't have time to redo your sheet, or I would have done it with the July 31st, but I think it's gonna be pretty close regardless.
well, but we started off at 2,063,063
Right,
on the first, and am I hearing you now talking about 732?
no, but that's like the final.
Oh, that's a fine, oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's the
I'm with you.
final. No, we're actually starting off with 2,095,095,
Okay.
and you started off with
Okay.
2,063,063, so I'm saying we're very
2,063,
close.
That's within, that's in the ballpark.
Yes,
Okay,
okay,
Okay, so having said that, I think we're ready to move on
to Stephen,
Stephen.
yes, and then we can
And-
move.
Thank you for coming, we really appreciate.
Not a problem. Let me just introduce myself officially. My name is Stephen Bloom. I'm with Severn Trent. I'm their finance director, and I'm happy to be here. It's always actually a quite pleasant drive for me to come over. really the main reason why I'm here, and I can certainly answer any questions about anything related to the financials, was to discuss kind of the cash flow questions that had come up. Now, I guess I can first start by answering, I think it was Phil's question about the financials. Normally, there always will be a delay in terms of when you get them versus when they're completed. We are a little bit further behind this month than usual because I kind of held back the financials until I was satisfied with the project update reports that we were asked to put in. And this is kind of more of a broader picture for everybody, but the board asked us to kind of take a look at the reserves for all of the funds. And I've been holding it back until I could say that I was comfortable with the information that I was getting. August numbers are done and will be sent out probably this week is my guess you'll get them. And then moving forward, you won't be 2 months behind, which is I think where you are now. The accountant is working on September now, so my expectation is within 2 weeks, September will be ready.
Okay.
You know, so. Now, I do not have any problems if you want the account to send you preliminary numbers, and everyone is just aware and understanding that they'll change and that they have not been approved, if that in any way helps, you know, because this is not a data entry situation. You know, her reports are live. She can run them and send them, and then as long as you're aware that, hey, you know, we will still be accruing things, and as you know, it's on accrual basis, so
Right, right.
especially at year end,
Right.
every dime gets accrued back into.
Right, exactly.
Chris, does that help you if he sends them early?
Well, I think
That's
it's
up to
just-
you, I think.
Why don't you sit? Let me open up the
Where's
chair.
the little voice
Oh,
box? I can just come over.
Well,
with
he's
I got it over here.
Oh,
up
that's
there
all
for
right.
him. Here you go.
I think it would, in some respects, I just think because it's very difficult, I think, for our committee to realize that we're processing expenses through, you know,
July.
say September 30th, but we're looking at cash
Yeah.
balances through July. And that's,
Right.
I think that's where the disconnect kind of comes in. It's very difficult to.
Well, I can see that because my numbers through August are about 2.5 million in total.
Yes,
So
see,
you're-
that's what, right, exactly, so it's kind of, and I really, and I think that we would have a better, understanding
Right.
and a clearer picture of,
And the reason
that's why I
why-
always tie back out to your cash balances to begin with.
Sure.
Just to make sure that everybody's, that we're tying back into what, the Gateway is seeing, and I just wanted to make sure that the cash that we are reporting is accurate.
Sure, I don't think there's a problem because usually the first